The flu virus has claimed more than 200 lives in California alone this season. Influenza usually targets children, the elderly, and those with underlying health conditions. But recently, the flu epidemic has been targeting young people. 40% of influenza-related hospitalizations this season were people ages 18 to 40. Symptoms include fever, body aches, excessive fatigue, and dry cough. There are 2 ways to get vaccinated: the old-fashioned way, by getting a shot, or, if you're afraid of needles, the nasal spray. Health officials say flu season begins in October and ends in late May. Contrary to popular belief, the flu season peaks in January and February. Although we can expect the flu to come around every year, the virus mutates, causing a new version of the bug. Approximately 133 billion doses of the vaccine have been distributed in the U.S. so far. The vaccine creates antibodies 2 weeks after vaccination. These antibodies provide protection from the viruses that are in the vaccine. The traditional flu vaccine protects you from 3 types of influenza: 2 influenza A viruses, H1N1 and H3N2, and influenza B. Did CSUN students get vaccinated?
No.
No.
I have not gotten my flu shot.
I did not.
No, I didn't get my flu shot.
Yes, I did.
No.
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 I did not get my flu shot.
Not yet. I want to get it as soon as possible.
My mom made me get it.
No.
No.
Nope.
Do you plan on getting your flu shot?
Yes.
No, anymore.
One day.
I feel like I'd rather let my body do the fighting, try to get my own immune system built up.
Me personally, I don't like getting shots because the history behind possibly getting ill even more. So I just try to avoid shots in general.
Well, I normally don't get sick at all, so I don't really see the need in getting one.
Because 1, I don't like doctors, and 2, I'm not trying to get injected with the flu because I don't need that happening right now.
I actually changed my eating habits, exercise, so I feel like that was kind of replacing the flu shot.
Today we discuss why students aren't getting vaccinated and why this year is so different. Dylan Connolly has more on the story. Dylan?
Thanks, Evan. Just like to introduce Dr. Sloane Burke. She's from the Health Sciences Department here at CSUN. And I'm joined by Dr. Sahl, epidemiologist at UCLA. It seems clear from what we just saw that a lot of people don't get flu shots because, they're scared of the vaccines, they don't think they'll work. We're gonna have a couple questions from students throughout the show, but first let's get to some basic info. Jack, let's start with you. How does a vaccine work?
A vaccine works by triggering your antibiotic response in a normal healthy person. And the outside protein coat of the vaccine has an ability to do that, but the vaccine primes the pump, if you would, so that your body's able to respond when faced with the actual disease. The vaccine is not a live, fully live virus, so it doesn't give you the disease, but it gives you the antibody protection.
Wonderful. Again, for you, Jack, what is the flu vaccine actually made up of? You kind of explained how it's made. Is it just made completely from some sort of anti-vaccination?
I'm not sure what an anti-vaccination is.
Or
no, I'm just the vaccine is made up of 3 parts. There's a fluid that's called a carrier that actually has something in it. There's something to preserve it and stabilize the vaccine, and that's usually some other additional chemicals that sometimes people question whether or not they're safe. And there's the actual antibodies themselves. Now, you don't actually have a full virus in the vaccine. All you need to do is have basically the proteins that are on the outside of the coat of the virus itself.
Wow.
And it's made up of those 3 things put together. But a vaccine actually has antigens from more than one flu virus, and as we'll talk more about it, that's important in order for it to protect against a broad spectrum of disease opportunities that students face.
Okay. Sloane, for you, how do scientists make a vaccine before flu season has arrived?
They look at, basically a team of researchers looks at the top viruses, and they predict what will be the top viruses that need to go into that vaccine. So as Jack had mentioned, looking at usually if it's a tri-vaccine for the flu, it has 3 different strains actually of the flu inside that vaccination. If it's a quad, it has 4. But they look at what they predict to be the top strains of flu that will occur and then create the vaccine in response to that prediction.
Wow. So it could vary completely each year depending on what they think is going to be the worst strain of that season. Wow.
Yeah, it can, but we hear positive information all the time. For this year, for example, the CDC said they were pretty on target with choosing the correct vaccination. So it's a very good thing.
Great. Jack kind of went into this, but so how does it work to where the vaccine doesn't actually make you sick? Sloane, you could take it.
Correct. And Jack can probably speak more to this, but the antibodies that are in the vaccine and the different components of the vaccine are such in lower safe doses. Not to say that a person that receives the vaccine won't have sometimes slight, very slight symptoms. You know, they might feel a little feverish, a little achy that day as the antibodies are taking effect. They take 2 weeks to take full effect. But they might feel some of the symptoms, others don't feel anything at all. So, you know, it creates that antibody response into the system.
Awesome. Okay, so now we're going to take a question from a CSUN student.
People who get the flu shot, do they have the flu, and can they get other people sick by them getting the flu shot?
Jack, we can start with you.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect that people who take the flu shot would get the flu itself or full-blown flu. But what you can happen is you can be exposed to a flu virus and start having the flu, then get the flu shot, and it's already kind of too late. You already are in the process of having the flu, and then you are a day before you show symptoms, and I think about 7 days after you show symptoms, you can then transmit the flu to other people.
Wow.
Correct, yeah.
Did you want to add anything?
I think just from the student perspective, I think there's the common myth that students believe that they became sick from receiving the flu vaccine, and many have that beyond even students. You know, I got the flu, I remember my mom saying that one year, you know, I just got the flu vaccine and I'm sick with the flu. And it's actually entirely a myth. Now, you may have a different strain of the flu, you may have a different bacterial sickness, you know, altogether. And so you can't predict that it was it most often will not be from that flu vaccine, as Jack had said, you know, that you were exposed to something else. And so it's important to have that flu vaccine. And then in the student's question, can you transmit something to others, as Jack had said, at some point, yeah, I mean, yes, you know, we encourage you to stay home, get sleep, wash your hands, you know, not be out in public so you don't expose whatever you may have to others, whether that be flu or not flu.
Why do you think people do complain about getting sick after vaccinations? Kind of what Sloane said, is it just over-exaggeration?
Well, I think there's a number of things, and part of it is this idea of a heightened sensitivity to the actual concept of getting the disease. So you go in and you think about, hey, I'm going to get the flu vaccine. You get the flu vaccine, and now you're really focused on signs and symptoms. And you may just have a runny nose or other sorts of infections, but in your mind, you've triggered and you've added the two things together. One of the tough things, I think, for scientists to sort out, and especially tough for most people, is the distinction between something that's causal, something one thing caused another thing, versus something that is coincident in time. And most things that happen are coincident in time. They have really nothing to do with each other, but your mind kind of links them all together.
So it's just a person overreacting because they think, oh, I have this. That means I have to be sick. So kind of just a total overreaction.
Exactly, and you have to think when the flu occurs is still during flu season, so which is as early as October, late into May, when you look at the actual whole entire season. Not the prime. The prime is January and February. We're here right in the prime. But when you look at, so your chances, one's chances of exposure are to everything that's out there in terms of flu, viruses, bacterial infections, are just greater during this season.
Yeah. Excuse me. Why does it take 2 weeks for the virus, or the vaccine, I'm sorry, to kick in?
I think Jack can answer
Jack,
that
go
well.
ahead.
He's our official antibodies.
Well, it's not magic. The body has to do things. The body has to get to work. And so the first thing has to happen is the body has to detect that there's a foreign presence in the body. And then the machinery has to start to manufacture the antibodies. And it has to happen enough so that you have protection, throughout your body. So it's just it's a machine. It's a machine process that takes time. Most things do, and so it's just the nature of it. Now, when we say 2 weeks, it's variable for different people. Some people have a very responsive immune system, and others have one that's less responsive. And so you have, again, like in any population, you'll have a lot of variability in terms of how that works.
Okay. I was gonna say, you were talking about how the CDC was able to pinpoint really, really good at what kind of flu we were gonna get this year. Does the vaccine help prevent any other illnesses? I know that may sound strange, but could it help you from getting, say, a heart attack or other things like that?
Right. No, it's a good question. It's an interesting question. Not at this point. It's focused onto those 3 or possibly 4 strains that they pick but the general vaccination, those 3 strains of influenza that are picked. Beyond that, there isn't conclusive research that it can help. To Jack's point, where you see different populations, such if somebody is elderly, obviously, or suffering from a chronic disease, their immunity is lower, and so they might be more, less responsive to the flu vaccine and more susceptible to opportunistic infections. But no, we wish it was one vaccine that could take care of everything, but unfortunately, it's just focused on the flu.
Well, I mean, as long as it does the job, it seems
That's
like
right. That's an important job.
Now, a lot of people don't really understand the difference between a flu and a cold compared to, say, like a virus or a bacterial infection. Do you think maybe you could explain the difference on a easy level?
I don't think so. I think it's very difficult to explain that because the symptoms kind of all run together. I will just make the comment, though, that a flu is a class of symptoms, and most people don't actually go in and get a test to get it diagnosed. You have the symptoms. You have sore throat. You'll have a runny nose. You might have some additional congestion, and you might have some fatigue and things like that. But for the most part, you then call that, hey, I got the flu. But you also could have had any number of other, kind of infectious diseases as well. Because there's millions of bacteria out there, and there's millions of viruses, and some of them are better than others at giving us these diseases. The only caution I would make is that if you have a virus-caused disease, then it doesn't do you any good to get something to kill bacteria.
Yeah.
If you have a bacterial disease, it doesn't do you any good to get something that kills flu viruses. But in general, you take a broad spectrum of things that treat symptoms. The course of the disease, it just runs its course, and the vast majority of everybody gets better relatively quickly.
Okay. So moving on to maybe a more broad question, how come the flu is so bad this year?
I don't know if it's necessarily bad. I mean, it's concerning in LA County, I think, and Jack maybe will speak to this more, but when we look at, I think in California, there's been about 150 deaths thus far this year, and roughly about 90 deaths in Los Angeles County And it is alarming that people with impaired immune systems, younger, older, and then people still die from the flu in this day and age, and that is alarming. I don't know if it's a little worse this year, I guess, than in years past, but that's somewhat relative. And I think just getting the messaging out becomes so important in terms of public health. Health education is many news media, you guys having the show here on Point, and people receiving the flu vaccine. I think a lot of people still have that old myth too that, oh, okay, if I'm a healthcare professional or if I work with students or I'm over the age of 65, then I should get a flu vaccine. But in fact, the Centers for Disease Control's recommendation is anybody from 6 months of age up. So I think getting that messaging out is key.
If I could follow up, Sloane, I think there's a little bit deeper dive, is that the virus has two characteristics. One is its infectability, so how communicable is it? And that's a big characteristic, because a virus that can't be spread very easily doesn't cause much of disease in populations. The other characteristic is how pathogenic is it, how much disease does it cause, how severe is it? So you could have a virus that spreads really easy but isn't very pathogenic, and then you don't get very many serious symptoms.
I see.
So those are the two characteristics that we look at. And in this particular case, those two things come together pretty well, and that's what's causing the more severe disease. But one other thing to pay attention to is different populations of people at different ages might have been exposed to a very similar flu or virus many years ago. They'll still retain that part of that immune capability. But say, for example, there was a very serious flu that came in the 1950s, and the people who were born, say, in the 60s and 70s were never exposed to it. So they might be more susceptible this time around, whereas people like me who were born in the 50s might not be so susceptible. There's a whole variety of things that go on to this. But the bottom line message is get a flu vaccine. If you do get the flu, take normal steps. And for those who are healthy, don't hang out with people who have the flu.
Okay. Both great answers. There was a 23-year-old from Santa Rosa that died, and I mean, he was really, really healthy. He exercised, he played sports. How come this flu is able to target seemingly young and healthy people? I know that preconditions or pre-existing conditions can help lead to better vulnerability of the flu. But how come it's even deadly to, say, young, healthy people?
I think for all the reasons Jack just spoke of, but also that we are all susceptible to the flu. I think that we all, it doesn't matter the age or the myth of certain populations are more at risk. Yes, that is very true. However, we are all susceptible. Even the younger, healthy, thriving population, as we consider the younger kind of population, is susceptible. And we have seen more of a presence of the H1N1 specifically make incidence rates here in Los Angeles and in greater Los Angeles. But we don't know, obviously, this student's particular case, this young gentleman's particular case, but looking at all the variables that come into play, shows how susceptible and vulnerable we really all are to the flu.
Yeah, and I think that emphasizes the importance of getting the flu vaccine, which is the far safer alternative.
You just mentioned the H1N1, which I believe is the flu that is so deadly now. What could you explain? You've kind of already explained the whole difference between viruses, flu, bacterial infections. What's the difference between, say, the normal flu and H1N1? Why? What makes it deadly compared to the other ones?
Okay, so in this context, there is no normal flu versus H1N1.
Exactly, it's normal flu.
Right. So the way that a flu is given a name, it's given a name by where it came from, say Asia, the type of animal that was the initial source, say a pig, and then it's got some other little Latin things in there, and then thrown in is the antigenic characteristics of the proteins, and it goes from H1N1 up to, I think, H9 or something like that. And so you get all those permutations of that. And so whatever, as Sloane mentioned earlier, whatever are the predicted flus that are going to be the dominant ones to show up the next season, the vaccine is targeted against that. There are two types of flu classes generally floating around. One is what we would call kind of systematic, or it's here all the time, which is the whole population is exposed all the time. And then there's this epidemic flu, or seasonal flu. And what we're experiencing now is the epidemic part, or the seasonal part. And those have particular antigenic qualities, which are the H1N1 characteristic.
Okay. Now we're going to take another question from a CSUN student.
Is there really an alternative to just getting inputted with the virus? And what is it, I guess?
I'll edit that kind of a little because you already said, you don't actually get infected with the virus itself. But what, if any, are there alternatives to getting a flu shot?
No good alternatives.
No.
I think the problem is that there's a kind of a misconception about that the flu shots themselves are going to cause some sort of disease in you or are dangerous. I think that's largely been, from a scientific perspective or a public health perspective, that's largely been addressed when the answer is no, these things are not dangerous. So what you're doing is you're basically saying that, okay, I don't want the flu shot because I want to be out without that additional risk, and then you're taking on the risk of getting the flu. But the bigger problem from a public health perspective is you also are taking on the risk of spreading the flu around to all the people who you are going to encounter. And just as a reminder, you can have the flu, show no signs at all, no signs and symptoms, and still be transmitting the disease.
Wow.
It would be called a low grade infection, but you can still be in that situation. I think the kernel of the problem is a vaccine unsafe?
Yeah.
And I think it's absolutely safe.
So you don't think any of the dangerous things that people associate with vaccines, you don't think their concerns are that valid?
No, I think there's myths from it can cause ADHD, in children. I mean, all of these sort of vaccines looming around, to weed allergies. I mean, we're just hearing so many things, and it's in fact dangerous. We worked for hundreds of years in public health to eradicate, at least from our area, diseases such as measles, chickenpox, and to control things such as the flu, and to just disregard that and not have that protection for others as well as for your own child or yourself is can be kind of considered irresponsible. So we want to value our health and value the health of those around us. So I think that's key.
Okay. You already answered. What's the best way then you would say to influence young people to go out there and get the vaccine right now, and that it's your best chance to combat the flu?
I think if anyone has ever suffered from the flu or, meningitis or mono or, anything that keeps you pretty bedridden, so, hey, there's no going on Facebook. You're even going to be too tired for that. There's no posting pictures to Instagram. There's no hanging out with your friends. I think you're even going to be too weak to play with the video games, at that point, But no, you're going to feel really ill. You're going to miss school. That's important for the CSUN students and other students. And just it could be dangerous, as we saw with the young gentleman here in Southern California, where it cost him his life. So I think knowing how severe it can be and to those around you, as Jack had said, and also the quality of life that you're going to be missing. If you've been diagnosed with the flu, you could be out of school and or work for 2 to 3 weeks.
Right.
So.
But I think a short answer to build on that is programs like this. Education, I think, is essential for all of us to learn what the appropriate steps are. Between the internet, media like this, newsprint, or that wonderful thing, websites, there's no shortage of excellent information. But the other additional thing that's needed is do you trust science or do you not trust science? Do you trust your public health professionals or do you not? And it's a very tough road to climb up if you basically don't believe in the value of the scientific process. Then you're probably not going to believe a lot of these things, and then I really don't have any help for you. You're on your own, because that's really what's gotten us where we've gotten in our society is eventually we know how to figure these things out.
The Claude Student Health Center has vaccinations for students, and also the Centers for Disease Control, the CDC, has a free app where you can look at where the closest vaccination center is for you for the flu.
Great. I just wanted to say thank you guys so much for joining us on the show today.
Mommy, I don't feel so well.
Okay, you wouldn't give yourself or your loved one poison, would you? Then why would you take or give counterfeit medications that may contain the wrong or no active ingredient? Counterfeit medications are out there. They can be ineffective and harmful to your health. Be a smart consumer and know your pharmacy, especially if you're purchasing medication online.
Everybody has a dream. Mine was to see the ocean. And with a little help, I made it.
NFC, AFC, offensive linemen, defensive tackles, quarterbacks, and cornerbacks are all living united to ensure the academic success of millions of kids in our communities all the way to graduation day. But that won't happen without you. So take the pledge at unitedway.org. Make a difference in the life of a child. Suit up like your favorite NFL players and become a volunteer reader, tutor, or mentor with United Way.
Can't let him make it.
Dude, you better not be illegally downloading movies again. I don't want a virus on my computer. Seriously.
Yes!
Got it.
They got it. What an idiot.
When you rip off copyrighted material, someone could be ripping you off.
Where's my money?
Clean kitchen surfaces, utensils, and hands with soapy water. 1 in 6 Americans will get sick from food poisoning this year. Keep your family safer. Check your steps at foodsafety.gov.
We would like to thank you for tuning in to On Point. If you'd like to see more, follow us on Facebook by searching CSUN On Point, and follow us on Twitter at CSUN On Point, all one word. This show also appears on our website at CSUNTVnews.com, or catch us on LA 36 every Sunday at 11:30 in the morning. From all of us here on Point, I'm Evan Robinson.